Hey up, right, I hope you all had a great Christmas, and I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you a more prosperous and libertarian new year. Now, from the 29th of January 2022, the rules of the road here in the UK are changing slightly, and that's the main subject of this video, but I just wanted to cover a couple of other little things off before we get started on that. Number one being vehicle excise duty. Obviously, as the number of electric vehicles and low emissions vehicles on the road increases, the amount of vehicle excise duty collected by the government is gradually diminishing. Now, actually, how it's going to affect the individual is quite complicated because there are so many tiers and levels that dictate how road users are going to be charged. But suffice to say, petrol and diesel drivers are going to find that the government's reaching just a little bit deeper into their pockets next time their vehicle excise duty is up for renewal. And yes, this will affect motorcycles. Now, there's been some sort of rumours going around, although I hasten to add that I've not been able to get to the bottom of it, so I can't ratify it, that the increase in charges may be levied according to the emissions status of your vehicle, with the more up-to-date Euro 5 models paying slightly less than the previous Euro 4 and Euro 3. It remains to be seen whether this will actually be the case, but what I will say is that MAG did allude to this in a conversation I had with them some weeks ago. So my personal feeling on this is that there may be an element of truth to it going forward from here, and it would certainly be a very useful strategy to devalue older petrol and diesel driven vehicles and, if you like, prematurely remove them from the road because they're no longer economically viable. Next up, speed limiters. All new vehicles for which type approval is applied for, I think it's from May this year, registered on or after the 6th of July 2022 will have to have speed limiters fitted. I made an entire video on this subject some time ago. I'll leave a link in the top right hand corner of this video for those who are not aware of this and would like to sort of get up to speed on the subject. For the moment, this doesn't include motorcycles, but that is purely down to the perceived technical challenges in making this technology work for motorcycles, and it will follow in due course, make no mistake. Now, this new legislation doesn't just affect the UK. The UK signed up to it in 2019 along with the EU. So this will affect vehicle sales in the EU as well. Now, manufacturers of existing models are being given a slight reprieve of 2 years to be able to incorporate this technology into existing models that, you know, are already being sold. Either way, they will have to have this technology fitted by 2024. Now, you might remember in a previous video that I mentioned the government had temporarily paused the rollout of the infrastructure needed for charging electric vehicles. Now, they've done a bit of a switcheroo, and they're basically putting the onus on me and you, the householder, and businesses and places of work. From this year, all new build houses will have to have a car charger installed as part of the build. I'm not quite sure what date this actually comes in force, but it is coming in force this year. Also, places of work that have car parks and supermarkets from this year find themselves in a situation where it is mandatory for them to have electric vehicle chargers in their car parks. So basically, reading between the lines, the government's thrown the whole country down this rabbit hole of electric vehicles. They've realised they can't fulfil their part of it by putting the infrastructure in place, and so they've dropped it in the lap of UK businesses, who of course will have no choice but to pass that cost on to me and you, whether we have an electric vehicle or not. And this comes after some reports over the Christmas period of electric vehicle owners wanting charge points installed in their older homes, only to find that the older wiring in their houses aren't up to the job. There was one guy that was quoted £14,000 by his electricity provider to get his home wiring situation up to scratch and fit 2 car chargers. He can't afford it, and now he's stuck with 2 electric cars that he can't charge up at home. Right, moving on. A little bit of good news. This year, insurance companies are being banned from increasing the premiums for existing customers so that they can offer low rates to pull new customers in. I find this very welcome. Every year when I renew my insurance, I always insist that they take me off automatic renewal, and every year they ignore me and try to automatically renew my insurance with about a 30% increase in the price. An ordeal that I found myself having to go through every year. To my mind, this is parasitic behaviour on the part of insurance companies. It's distasteful, it's dishonest, and these changes are not before their time. They should have been done a long time ago. But having said that, keep an eye on these slimy parasites, because if they can find a way around it, they will. Again, I'm not exactly sure what date these regulations come into force, but it is coming in this year and it's very welcome. And finally, before we get on to the main subject of this video, county councils are being given greater powers to prosecute or issue fixed penalties to drivers that commit misdemeanours on the road. Now, previously this was limited to things like parking on double yellow lines and driving in bus lanes. But this year this is going to be expanded to include a host of other road traffic offences, which I think are most likely to be enforced by static surveillance cameras. Police presence on our roads has diminished remarkably over the last 10 or 15 years, and modern technology in the way of cameras is taking over and the responsibility handed to councils. So, in the near future, you will find if you go through a red light, you may well get a ticket through the door. If you stop on a boxed junction when you're not turning right, you may well get a ticket through the door. And this is likely to come into play with any other road traffic offences where cameras can be utilised. Personally, I don't have a problem with it. I try to ride or drive responsibly, so I don't envisage that it's going to cause me any problems. It's those people who habitually break the law because they think no one's watching that are going to come a cropper. And I do think, especially in urban areas, something had to happen eventually because it's just getting out of hand. Right, now on to the main and final part of this video. Now, I've been reading news reports on some new driving practices that are to be included in the Highway Code. For those of you outside the UK, the Highway Code is the driver's handbook, if you like, government advice on how we should conduct ourselves on the road. Something that we all become intimately acquainted with while we're taking our driving lessons to get through our test, but I've got to admit, I'm one of those people, once we've passed our tests, we tend never to pick it up again. And indeed, there has been a little bit of a furore among the newspapers that apparently in surveys, only 30% of UK drivers are aware of some changes that are coming in on the 29th of January, that's just 2 or 3 weeks away from now, intended by the Department for Transport to change driver behaviour for the better. And I would like to make it clear from the outset that I wholeheartedly agree with the implementation of these new practices. With 1 or 2 reservations, I don't think it goes far enough. Now, I don't know about you, but I've witnessed driving behaviour on British roads deteriorate remarkably over the last 10 or 15 years. Both as a cyclist in the past and as a motorcyclist, I have first-hand encountered intimidatory behaviour by car drivers, van drivers and heavy goods vehicle drivers. And although I admit motorcyclists are not blameless, those three categories of drivers are the worst offenders. And the standard of driving behaviour in this country is the worst that I've ever seen it. There is a certain category or mindset of driver that clearly believes that the safety of other road users comes secondary to his or her convenience. People who view pedestrians as fair game if they have the temerity to cross the road. I'm sure just about everybody watching this video will have encountered this behaviour. You try to cross the road and not only do oncoming drivers not slow down to take that into account, they either speed up or they maintain the speed in order to intimidate you. As though they have the mentality that if they hit you, it's your fault for being on the road. It's not their fault. They have a right to, if you like, run you over rather than suffer the inconvenience of having to slow down slightly to let you pass. Drivers who see you but then purposely pretend not to see you when you're standing at a zebra crossing, in order to claim some sort of justification for not stopping when they should. Drivers that overtake pedal cycles and then make a left turn, effectively cutting the pedal cycle's path off, forcing them to brake for all they're worth. And of course, the most frequent infraction of all, the HGV driver who pulls out onto the roundabout into oncoming traffic because he's bigger than you, so he doesn't have to stop, because if a collision occurs, he's not going to feel it, but it'll cause you a lot of hassle. It might even kill you. This kind of behaviour, although it's probably always existed on our roads, has become endemic, and its frequency these days, I've got to say, is frightening. So, in an attempt to curb this behaviour, from the end of this month, the government will be putting some new rules into force, which will be available for you to read in the new Highway Code. And I will leave a link in the video description down below that will take you to the government website that highlights those changes. Basically, they are introducing a tier system where the road user that has the greater chance of causing harm to others has a greater level of responsibility. Now, I think these new rules are going to cause some confusion to people, because although the government states that this creates a new level of criminal responsibility, they haven't actually created any new offences to cater for it. But including these new rules in the Highway Code is very significant. I'd like to just dispel a myth that does seem to be pretty widespread. A lot of people think that the Highway Code is a sort of best practices rulebook, and you don't have to follow everything to the letter. It's not the law. Let me just clear that up for you. The Highway Code is not just a manual for drivers. It's a points to prove manual for magistrates and Crown Court judges that deal with traffic matters. And I'm speaking here from direct experience as a professional witness in both of those courts. Every magistrate and every Crown Court judge has a copy of the Highway Code in his or her courtroom, and they will use that Highway Code booklet as a bible for deciding where the finger of blame is pointed, whether that be a road traffic accident or a road traffic infringement. If an incident has occurred as a result of a driver or the accused doing something that the Highway Code advises you not to do, or not doing something that the Highway Code advises you to do, you will be found guilty. Now, the new rules make the pedestrian king of the road, especially if that pedestrian is elderly, infirm or very young. It is the responsibility of every other road user to look out for their safety and act in a way that ensures their safety. Now, I've come across this a few times in the past. If a motorist is travelling along the road and wants to turn into a side street, if a pedestrian is on the road on that side street, he has right of way, and that motor vehicle must refrain from turning into that junction until the pedestrian has completed his manoeuvre across the road. Now, apparently not a lot of people know that, and as a pedestrian, honestly, I've lost count of the amount of times I've ended up in an altercation with a driver because they don't know that. They've turned into a junction where I'm crossing the road, and they seem to think that they're within the rights to sound the horn at you and stick their head out of the window and shout abuse, when actually they're the ones that are breaking the law, because they've entered the junction while I was crossing. Now, the new rules take this a step further, because whereas in the past the pedestrian had to be present on the road, i.e. just 1 foot on the road, before that motor vehicle turned into the junction and he had right of way, he now has right of way simply by being present at the side of the road waiting to cross. In that situation now, whether you're on a pedal cycle, a motorcycle or any other type of motor vehicle, you must stop and give way to pedestrians in that situation. And the same applies at uncontrolled pedestrian crossings. A pedestrian's simply waiting to cross must be given precedence by traffic. Now, I am just summarising here, by no means consider this to be an exhaustive video on the subject, but another situation of note is where traffic is at a standstill. Again, I'm sure most of you have encountered this in the past. There's a traffic jam, the traffic's not moving, you decide that while it's stood still, you're going to slip across the road in between the cars to get to the other side of the road. And just as you do so, the car that you're about to cross in front of decides to move up to intimidate you a little bit. That is now illegal because pedestrians have right of way in those situations. Cars, motorcycles, horses and cyclists must wait to allow you to cross the road. And rest assured, for road users that fail to adhere to these new rules, if you wipe a pedestrian up, you are very likely looking at jail time. Now, the way this new tier system or hierarchy is arranged, those road users with the least level of vulnerability on the roads are the ones with the greater responsibility. Goods vehicles are at the bottom of the pile. They are responsible for everyone else's safety. The responsibility lies with them to ensure the safety of other road users around them. So the heavy goods vehicle driver that pulls out of a junction or a roundabout into oncoming traffic is once again looking at possible jail time if he causes an accident, especially if it's an injury or fatal accident. The next vehicles down this tier, if you like, are the car drivers, and probably some of the worst offenders, if I'm honest. Sitting above them are motorcyclists, because obviously us motorcyclists are very vulnerable. Then we have pedal cyclists and horse riders, followed, as I say, by the king of the road, the pedestrian. Now, to be honest, a lot of these regulations or rules, if you like, were already in force, but this new hierarchical system, if you like, sets it out in black and white who is responsible for who, and points the finger at those with the greatest level of responsibility, who are often, you know, the worst offenders. Now, where I do have some reservations about the way this has been put together, and I think, again, this is a sign of the times, is relating to pedal cyclists. Now, as I've said before, I used to be a pedal cyclist myself. I used to cycle to work on a regular basis, and I fully understand the difficulties that a cyclist encounters. And whereas a lot of cyclists are responsible riders, there are unfortunately a group of cyclists that are a danger to themselves and to others, to be quite frank. Again, they've gone into the same mindset as a lot of other road users, in that they think nothing on the road is allowed to interfere with their convenience. And unfortunately, I've got to say that these new rules don't do anything to counter that. In fact, I have this vision that it's actually going to make that particular mindset even worse. Because in their eyes, it's bestowing them some new powers, if you like. That class of cyclist is going to continue to be a nuisance, knowing full well that the onus is on other road users looking out for him or her, basically. And I'm talking about the virtue signalling self-entitled man in tights here, who are just going to see these new rules as justification for doing whatever they're like, and it's everyone else's problem, particularly in relation to cycle paths. Now, I always used cycle paths when I could because I much preferred it to tangling with the traffic, and cycle paths are put there as a safe alternative for cyclists to ride on them rather than mixing with the traffic. But the new rules do categorically state that there is no requirement for cyclists to use cycle paths when they are available. They can still ride on the road, and I'm sorry, but if this is sort of new laws aimed at road safety, that is totally wrong. And I think in that respect, these new rules are a recipe for disaster. It is just my personal view, but I think it's high time now that cyclists had more responsibilities on the road, possibly to include things like insurance and some sort of registration requirement. But certainly, if rules like this are going to be put in place, mandatory use of cycle lanes should, without question, have been implemented where cycle lanes are available on that route. You shouldn't be picking and choosing where safety is concerned. And I think similarly, some obligations should be put in front of horse riders. Horses are at the best of times unpredictable animals, and again, I think it's time some mandatory requirements were put in place for riders to ensure the safety of other road users, because usually when something goes wrong with a horse, it's absolute carnage to property. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. I do hope that you found this video enlightening. If you have, please leave a like and subscribe. I will of course be back on Friday, so until then, ride safely and I'll see you soon.